continue our conversation on the Electoral Amendment Bill that was signed by President Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, this is what the presidency had to say. It said the Electoral Amendment Bill really marks a significant milestone in the evolution of our democracy by expanding electoral participation and making sure that it widens the pool of leadership and the leadership choice for the National Assembly and provincial legislatures. It says that the bill presents a development that can only enrich and sustain our growing constitutional democracy. Now, Jamie Mightie, let's continue our conversation with you. Just looking at what came out, that particular statement around this being a milestone. And earlier on, you were speaking to us about how there are going to be a lot of challenges as it stands. We know that the leader of Busa, Mmusi Maimane, along 40 other civil society organizations, they are going to be applying for direct access at the Constitutional Court. Now, the IEC, Jamie, has raised concerns around how these, legal battles or legal challenges are going to affect the 2024 elections. How, in your view, do you see these challenges affecting the elections?
Well, the IEC is definitely going to have a challenge if this is sent back to Parliament, if it's sent back to the President's desk, because they have said that they need 18 months to be able to run an election. So the time constraints right now, because we are now 12 months away from an election date, the earliest one being in May. And I think the latest that you can have it is in August. You can have it 15 months, I think, is the cutoff. After that, it becomes unconstitutional. So they will have a challenge from a time perspective. Having said that, it's very important to have an electoral act that, one, does give effect to the Constitutional Court judgment, does give a free and fair political environment for independents to run. And it's not a strong enough argument to say it will be difficult to execute our job, so let's not change this particular legislation. Because right now, as it stands, if the legislation is unconstitutional, it means that the election itself will be unconstitutional.
Right.
So it needs to be fixed, and that's what needs to happen.
And what do you think are the prospects of success, Jamie, should this then go back to court?
Well, I actually think that the prospects of success for the people who are challenging this electoral act on the actual, terms and whether it's free and fair and whether or not it gives effect to the judgment will be successful. I think they've got strong prospects. The challenge obviously becomes the technical challenge, because it may very well be the case that the Constitutional Court says, well, the time constraints are significant, therefore we will have an election in the next election, which is based on the old Electoral Act, and then have an election in 2029, which is based on a new Electoral Act, and give Parliament a further year or 2 years to rectify the problem. But in terms of prospects, I do think that those who are challenging the act actually have strong prospects of success.
Right. Jamie, let's stay with issues around, elections and politics and political parties. There's two new political parties that were launched just this week, Arise South Africa and Rise Mzansi. A lot of people really just saying, sure, there is going to be so much choice. South Africans are actually going to be spoiled for choice on the ballot. Is this necessarily a good thing, Jamie? What do you make of, the mushrooming of so many political parties as we head into the 2024 elections? We know that former Action SA leader in Gauteng, Bongani Baloyi, also launched his own party, Shiluba.
Well, in the first instance, I think that having variety is good. Having a wide field is good because you have competition. A supermarket, I think, has over 5,000 what they call SKUs, and nobody ever complains that there are too many options in the supermarket. It's good. It's good to have options. People have often said that they don't see a party that it works for. So it's good to have leaders stepping into the ring trying to say, this is something that will work for you. I don't think that there's going to be a saturation. And when I think about Arise South Africa and Rise Mzansi, I think that Arise South Africa is an opportunistic, party which is trying to use the branding of Rise Mzansi to actually get a seat. You know, once in a while you have a party that names itself close to another party. You know, AIC gets seats because of the ANC. But to look at the Rise Mzansi political offering, what we saw is a former business, journalist and editor put together a team of a variety of South Africans from a wide range and make a proposition to South Africa that they are able to actually provide a professional party that is staffed by a new crop of leaders that will not necessarily deliver in a way that the old political parties can. So obviously Rise Mzansi is led by Songezo, and we've spoken about him just in the opening, Songezo Zibi, and there are a variety of other people who are in the political formation. It's a strong lineup. It's an interesting proposition. He has a strong story, and there are two ways of looking at this. One is that they are making a very concerted play for the professional community in Johannesburg, Cape Town, Durban, and all of the places, all of the metros really, where you have a large professional working community, where you've got the middle class basically. And there's a significant number of South Africans who fall into that bracket. In the upwards of 4 to 5 million. So they can actually get a significant number of seats if those people view them to be an attractive option. There's also the viewpoint that they are still aiming for broader South Africa, because if you look, they've got someone like Makashule Ghana, who is a well-educated man but comes from the rural areas of Limpopo. I think Makashule Ghana has a computer science degree as well as an economics degree. But if you look at Songezo Zibi himself, he comes from the rural parts of the Eastern Cape.
Yeah.
So even though they are people who have accomplished a lot in the metropolitan areas, they still have a value proposition and stories that go back to the most rural parts of South Africa. So I think that it's not a disadvantage to be a village boy who made it in the city, and they may actually be able to also get a lot of votes because they do understand those communities and are from those communities. Makashule Ghana himself was somebody who used to work in the Democratic Alliance around ground-based community organizing. So he's somebody who brings a lot of experience to that particular role for them. So I would consider them to be a contender, but I would consider them to be a contender amongst the new parties. So if you look at the new parties or some of the relatively new parties, I would consider Action SA to fall into that, Patriotic Alliance to fall into that, Busa to fall into that, and now Rise Mzansi. So there's this group of 4 emerging players that I think will play a role in coalitions, will play a role in the government of South Africa in one shape or another. And I think that's where Rise Mzansi falls into now. Whether or not they can overtake some of the historically big parties, which are not the big 3, when you're talking about IFP or Freedom Front Plus, that's really what we're going to have to be tracking.
Right. Jamie Mightie, as usual, thank you so much for your insights. Really appreciate it. That was our socio-political analyst, Jamie Mightie, joining us this morning here on The Morning Show.